Everybody's had some adventures. Everybody's had a few close calls. Everybody's got a story. What's yours?
Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 28 of Cool Story with David J. McNeil. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your continued support. This episode features a chat with my friend and longtime acting coach, actor Jeff Seymour. One of the great things about this podcast is that I regularly get to meet new people and find out what they're all about. But what is equally satisfying is that the show is a great excuse to connect with old friends and old acquaintances and dig deep into conversation to find out more about their journey and what makes them tick. This is one of those conversations. I met Jeff almost 20 years ago when I signed up for a weekend intensive acting course that he was teaching in Toronto. I was quickly turned on to his way of helping actors prepare for the big part, the big role. And over the years, I returned often for other workshops and guidance whenever he was back in town. Today, in-class training is non-existent in the COVID era, but that hasn't slowed Jeff down any. He's busier than ever. We talked about how his program has evolved over the years, his life as a young man, and all things acting. Here is my conversation with Jeff Seymour. Hey, Jeff, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you, David.
Well, it's so nice to have you on the podcast. I was just doing some math today, trying to figure out how long I've known you for, and I think I met you back in 2003 is when I took a workshop with you, a weekend intensive workshop. Does that sound about right? You were living at your condo on Richmond?
That's right.
Where the students get to come by and work with you in your condo.
That was
a nice
such
setup.
a great, because it was a live work. So I was even doing it legally in that building. And that condo, in the center of Toronto, made it really easy. People just came over. It was a social affair as well as a lot of fun having the acting class there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's I think that was about 2003 because I was doing the math and then I was thinking about when you were working on Jeff Limited. When I first met you, we did the weekend intensive, and then shortly after that, I joined your once a week class. And then once I got into that, we were having daily chats about what was happening with the show that you were working on called Jeff Limited.
Right.
And so I think it's about 2003, 2004.
Yeah, we were developing it back then. Because we shot it, I believe, 5 and 6. So there was a time when my writing partner Eric Fromm and I had come up with this idea for the half-hour show, and then we wrote some episodes. And I think, there was been a lot of chatter. I thought it would be good for everyone to kind of take the journey, So I know I was telling stories about all the meetings, all the mishaps along the way. And then, a few of the students ended up being in the show, which was kind of fun.
Yeah, including myself. I played the purchaser, and I was looking at IMDb today. The episode was Body by Jeff, which is a pretty fun, crazy episode.
That's right. Oh, man, I don't think a day went by that I wasn't sitting on that set with Jesse or Inga and Sam. Just saying always, can you believe we get to do this? I mean, it was just, or Eric and I would write some episode, where there would be camels. Yeah. Then you just forget about it. And then one day I'd come to set and I'd see, the camel man showing up. And I'd think, oh, that's right. That's right. Today's camel day,
Yeah.
Just insane. It was like we could just wave this wand and they would create these crazy props or whatever. I mean, it's boy, I tell you, sure beats working for a living.
Yeah, it's a fun thing. It's a fun thing to do. For people who are listening to the podcast and aren't actors, aren't part of the business that we work in, you've made a career as an actor and also a teacher. You also ran a theater for many years in Los Angeles. I want to get to that stuff later, and then specifically later talk about sort of what your vision was when you became a teacher and kind of your mission as an acting teacher. But before we do that, I wanted to talk to you a bit about where it all began and your early days. Are you a first generation American?
Yes, I am. Both my parents are Iranian.
And so when did they come to America?
I think 1945.
1945. So they left like way before the Cultural Revolution.
All of that. Yeah. My dad wanted to come to America I think, since he was 16. He was a very well-educated man. And he told me he used to get the National Geographic or Look or some magazine you can't even believe used to be around back then. And knew all the states, all the capitals. He just really wanted to come here. So he finally did, with his wife, my mother, and my oldest brother, who's much older than I am. But they came to America in 45, yeah.
And you were born in D.C. Is that where they first landed?
No, they first landed on San Diego. Then they lived in New York for 3 years, kind of immediately, and then went out to Monterey, California. And my dad started working at the Army Language School, which was the precursor for him working at the CIA for about 30 years as a linguist. He taught languages to the agents.
And so that's how you ended up in D.C. then?
That's right. Well, D.C., I was born in D.C. because that's where the hospital was, but we actually lived in Northern Virginia, which was just across the Potomac.
Right, the bedroom community of D.C. and stuff.
Yeah.
And were your parents patrons of the arts? Was art in the house? Making that sort of thing?
My mother loved classical music, and she was a champion cha-cha dancer in her day.
Nice.
She wanted to be an actress. Both my parents loved the movies. And I was the youngest, very youngest by many years of 4 boys. So I kind of had a front row seat to all the insanity that went on in the Seymour household. Mm-hmm. And, it was probably my first kind of kitchen theater, kitchen drama, watching all that kind of stuff. And then I was a latchkey kid, so I was left alone all the time. And so I watched TV relentlessly. And I think all that led to my fascination with, what I do. Yeah.
I used to watch Inside the Actors Studio all the time. And one of the big common denominators in that show seemed to be that a lot of the actors that we know well, the actors that we look upon, with a lot of admiration, oftentimes were left alone a lot. Either were maybe army brats and they moved around a lot and they didn't get a chance to sort of sow, their roots and meet friends or whatever. Or for whatever reasons, they spend a lot of time on their own, kind of using their own creativity to amuse themselves.
That was absolutely it. I mean, you just make stuff up, you just have to use your imagination. There's no one there to distract you. So, and certainly when I was a kid, you just went out in the yard and you came home when the street lights came on and they let us out like the cats in the morning and you came back at night, fears. So it was a different world, but yes, that it was all of that. And I used to think, I thought I would be a doctor. I thought I'd be an architect. I thought I'd be all of these things. And then I finally at around 18, I realized, no, I just want to pretend like I'm all those things. And I faced it at 18. I have a friend I still have to this day. And I turned to him and I said, Doug, I think I'm going to be an actor.
Yeah.
And so it was 18 that I decreed it. But then when people say, when did I knew as a kid, I guess I knew it was just nothing I've ever wanted to do besides talk about human behavior and look at people and do skits and entertain. And it's been my whole life. I've never, ever done anything else. I'm a lucky man that I can actually occupy my days with something that never feels like I'm working. I mean, I'm a lucky guy, man.
So what was the first step you took to start on that journey?
Well, at 18, I realized I knew nothing. I'd never gotten into theater at school. I was kind of a class clown. So I thought, well, I'll go to a 2-year college around here and I'll take their theater department and learn what's what, And that would be the precursor for me then going and auditioning for the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. So I thought I'd go there 2 years. After about a year, I felt I'd kind of tapped that joint out. So I just decided I'm going to go audition for the American Academy of Dramatic Arts. And I picked a place in Tennessee. I remember I was afraid to go up to New York City. I thought it would be too intense. So I drove. It was like an 8-hour trip. I took my girlfriend at the time who was going to play the other part in the audition pieces. We drove in my brother's car. I borrowed his big sedan and we drove 8 hours out to Tennessee, went into this. I remember the lady was a doctor, I'm guessing a PhD at some university. And we went into her parlor, old-fashioned house in Tennessee. She said, would you like some water? I said, yes. I drank it. We did our 2 scenes. She said something nice, like, I'm sure you'll do very well in your life, young man. We got in the car and drove 8 hours home. I mean, it was literally like 10 minutes in her house,
Right.
And so that was it. Then I got involved, invited to go. And I went out to LA, bought a van, put all my stuff in it.
Yeah.
That same friend that I said I was going to be an actor, Doug, we drove across country, real coming of age, 4,500-mile odyssey.
Yeah.
It was just a thing to do. But as I look back now and how times have changed, driving in a van and then getting set up and leaving home and being 3,000 miles away. I mean, it's all so romantic, in retrospect, it's quite charming now. Think back.
So what year was it you landed in LA and started working then?
I landed in LA in 77.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I went to the Academy, 77, 78, 79. I got out in 79, and I was lucky enough to get a job on the first season of a TV show called Knots Landing.
Sure, that was a huge
spin-off
huge
of Dallas, yeah. And I played gang kid number 1.
Yeah.
And I had lines, and the deal was I had a group of my gang with us, and we go up against Ted Shackelford, who was leading that. He's drunk. He's coming down the wrong set of stairs. I remember my line. My line was, so we greet him. You can imagine. I think in retrospect, we look like dancers, but we had leather jackets on. But I think we looked like we were part of the Jets or something,
Yeah.
But we're supposed to, in those days, terrorizing in TV was a lot more benign. But we go up the stairs. He comes down. I stop and I say, "Toll road, man. You got any coins?" Now, naturally, I've gotten better at being able to do that line because I've had many years of training. But that was it. And then I stole his wallet when he tried to punch out one of my friends because he put his jacket down like a fool. And then I said, hey, man, no contest, man. You're the champ. You're the champ. And then we just went running off. And that was my first gig.
You dropped your switchblade and ran.
Yeah. Oh, switchblades, please. I think we would have just danced around him until he died or something. At any rate, that's how it all started. And, that's all I've ever done.
Yeah. And so once you got that role, did you start picking up work quickly or?
Yeah, as quick as it could be. I did a bunch of those old shows. I did that. Then I did Hill Street Blues. That was a really good gig because I was a cop for 3 episodes. And
that was a great
arc, and it was amazing to be a part of that. That was the first season.
Yeah.
And I did Bosom Buddies with Tom Hanks.
Nice.
And when he was in that crazy show, and I drove him home every night because Tom Hanks didn't have a car. And he said, "Hey, you live in the Valley?" I said, "Yeah." So we would sit in his driveway and talk each night. He was a lovely guy. Everything that you hear about him is true.
Yeah.
I did the Jeffersons with Wheezy and Sherm and other things. And then, I started teaching like immediately. I come from a family of teachers. So it just, it felt like I had a preoccupation with it, and so I did that immediately. That's why I've been teaching now for 40 years.
Yeah, well, that's a great way to start your career. I mean, those are some pretty iconic shows, especially those are all shows people of our generation know very well, even here in Canada. I mean, we grew up watching those shows. Hill Street Blues, though, I just love that show. Stephen Bochco, that was such an amazing show. That the cast on that was so good. It was, gritty and so well written and
different. So different. And in that first season, they did something they'd never done in television before, and that was they killed one of their own. And they established me and this guy who was my partner, and then they had a situation on the street where he had his throat opened up with a straight blade from a hooker.
Right.
And he died in my arms. And it was the 5th episode of that first season. And it was such a big hubbub because that was gritty. Before then it was overlit policewoman, everything was overlit and squeaky clean. And, here it was dark, the camera moved. And then, he just killed one of his. And I remember everyone making such a big deal about it before the shoot because it was going to be a bit of TV history right there. They were going to do this thing, and it's just shocking to people because they established the guy. The guy had been in the show. It wasn't a guest star.
Yeah.
He had been one of the people, and they did it and then killed him. That's interesting. So, yeah, it was a big deal back then, and it's fun to look back, and think, wow, okay, I did that. That's fun.
And so you started teaching. What were the beginnings of that? How did that all start?
Well, I knew I always wanted to teach, and I wasn't really thrilled with the way that I thought they were teaching at the academy. It all seemed like old school nonsense to me. And it just seemed like too much hocus pocus and, animals and, having private moments and all sorts of stuff, which at the time seemed interesting. But then as I got out of it a little bit, I said, I think this is just old school, cumbersome, overthought stuff, and I guess at an early age, I kind of boiled it down to a very simple premise. I thought, well, if what we're trying to replicate is us in real life, say at our biggest moments, at our best stuff, not just as Alfred Hitchcock said, it's not a slice of life, it's the frosting. So that's what entertainment should be, the concentrated, sweetest. There's no currency necessarily in a couple people talking or, sitting and chatting about nothing just because they're authentic. So, we entertain people. But even in that, if you took your most dramatic moments in life or hilarious moments in life, my theory was, okay, well, if I want to get to this kind of believability and genuine authenticity, I thought, well, what do people do to have that happen? How do people get to that moment? What am I thinking about when I'm in one of these horrible arguments where I feel I'm doing my best dramatic work ever? What am I really thinking about? And in being honest, I quickly realized nothing to do with acting at all. At all. It was about other stuff. So I thought, well, if this is what we're trying to do, why don't we just not worry about acting and let's just talk about it like people would talk about it and approach it like people would approach. And sure, there's some concessions. It is, after all, make believe, but primarily, I would think that we should be inspired by the same thing that inspires us to do what we do in life. And so I started just creating the simplest language I could for that. And eventually became the real life actor, for which I wrote the book. And it's kind of named everything. I just thought of the simplest name I could come. I certainly wasn't going to call it the Seymour Institute. Although during the Zoom classes, I'll be honest, I do joke. I always say, here at the Seymour Institute, but no, the real life actor to me was the thing. And, now I've been doing it for 40 years.
I don't know whether you use this term, but I would describe it as, I think you might have, and where I got this from, is that you have a very blue collar approach.
Yes, I think so. I that would follow suit. I think that most of the time acting classes, everything is just too precious. It's also precious. Everyone has to sit and this whole idea of trying to get into character and getting into the moment and all of this stuff, to me, I find it so precious. And then because it's so precious, I feel that what it does is it ends up taking the actor's power away, because the actor makes himself believe that I have to go sit first and be quiet, and I really have to focus, and I have to put my mind, which means there's a chance that it couldn't happen. So already you're entertaining the idea that maybe it won't be. So to get it to be, I need to go sit over there and I need to go through this ritual. And to me, it's insane, because it's almost like you're asking permission of yourself to do something. The difference is, in real life, I say, how do we prepare for things? I'll tell you how we do. The door opens up. I have a history with the guy, and I immediately start having an argument with him. I don't have to tell him, oh, I got to go over here and really think about this. Why? Well, because we're quick on our feet. Our mind is our own. I decide what I want when I want to decide it. And that's power. That's the power the actor needs. This business of, sitting around or laying down or going to exercise or something. I think you're saying, man, I got to do this before I do that. And I think that's disempowering. So all of that old school nonsense, I don't believe in it. And I've made my whole life trying to make these points.
And for people listening to the podcast who aren't actors and who are wondering, well, what is that old nonsense or whatever? Over the years, there's been a lot of, I guess it started in the 50s and 60s mostly. We started to hear about the method and Stanislavski teachings and the Meisner method and all that kind of stuff. And there were a lot of great actors who studied with these people who did great work and changed film and television. I'm talking about Brando and Jimmy Dean and people like that. And so everybody started talking about those techniques, and all of a sudden students started flocking to those schools. And for a lot of people, that those methods seem to have worked out and been really helpful. Or maybe a lot of those people were just going to be massive stars anyways, and had a proclivity for being great actors.
Well, I tend to agree with that. And if I could, in a quick little thumbnail, give you an idea of exactly what it is, because, you know, I respect all those people.
Yeah.
My belief is those people were very useful at a certain time. So in a real quick thumbnail, let's look at where it all starts. The first time we see any kind of recording of anyone is what, Birth of a Nation or something, or before that a little bit, but like 1906. There's no sound. We have picture, and everything has to be a little overdone. You know, you have the villain has black on with a big mustache that he can twirl. Yeah. And the female has tons of curly blonde hair, and she's tied to railroad tracks with too much rope. And the train is getting too close. And all the guy's concerned with is wiggling his little mustache while he watches her about to get crushed. And then we have a person in a white hat come up on a white horse. My point is, everything was overdone because there was no sound. They had a little bit of music that would play. There's some placards that maybe would come up and say something that would help us follow the plot. And then in 1929 with the jazz singer, we had sound now. Now we have sound, you see. But I don't think that immediately stopped everybody from overacting. You know, we were used to silent, used to using our face in a completely different way. But now we have sound. Now, I think there are some actors that just naturally were kind of natural, even by today's standards.
Yeah.
You see them sometimes. You'll watch an old film and you're like, boy, that old guy looks just, that's some really real stuff he's doing. I think some people would just do that, you know?
Yeah.
But the thing was that, and there was also that way of speaking. It was called the mid-Atlantic accent, where you'd hear all these people. We're here at the place today. We're seeing about 1,500 people walking through the doors. You know, this was, you know, people think that's how people talk. No, that was an accent that they wanted, the mid-Atlantic accent. So you'd walk in, you'd say, hello, darling. And she'd say, where have you been? You know, and there'd be this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, now you have people sitting around looking at that shit. They're looking at what they're doing, and they're thinking, you know, that's not how we do it. So you have the Moscow, you know, the group theater. You have Stella Adler. You have Elia Kazan, and people sitting around. And now pretty soon they're saying that crazy exercise, like sit there and feel the sun on your face. I just want you to sit. So everyone's going, oh, yeah, it's hello, darling. I said, no, just sit down. Just stop. Now pretend like you have some hot coffee. And I think what they were doing was they're trying to put the brakes on. They were saying, all right, everybody just stop.
Take a breath.
So what is that like to really feel coffee? What is that like when you're alone? What is a private moment? Let me see a private moment. This was unheard of, unless it was some kind of foreign film, you know, with private, that kind of gritty life was different in our film. So they'd say that. And so what's happening is different teachers are coming at a time when it's most needed. You have people like suddenly Brando and James Dean, everybody just being so irreverent. I don't care. I'm not, you know, I don't come into a room and say, hello, darling, you know, and he's saying, Stella, what's up, Stella? You know, and he's talking in this weird way and being so believable. And now we're training, we're saying, how do we get to that? And we're going through all these exercises, I think, to try and turn back this business of silent film and overacting and breaking it down. Okay, great. But then you have these movie stars, and you get into the 60s, and you have the Al Pacinos now, and Scorsese, and certainly Robert De Niro, and these people start coming along, and Jon Voight, and Dustin Hoffman, and everybody is starting to do this realistic thing, and then it goes on. We go from that realism into even a more hyper-realism almost, to the point now where it's often heard when you go to an audition, the casting director will say, the director doesn't like, don't act. The director doesn't like acting, don't act. Well, I'm a serial killer. Well, of course I'm going to act, right? But what they're saying is, we want it to look like just people. We don't want any acting at all. We don't want to see any acting. We want to feel like we're watching real people. So my whole idea is that, you know, those things, those schools of thought were great when they happened, Meisner in the 60s and 70s. But it's accepted now. We're doing the hyper-realism stuff. And so we don't need to break people down and have them drink coffee and pretend like they're an animal or something to try and get in touch with something that is more sincere, perhaps, and authentic. We don't have to do that.
Yeah.
Let's not even talk about that stuff anymore. Let's move on. And I see advances in all sorts of other things, all sorts of other coaching, all sorts of other systems. But for some reason, acting, all people want to do is just point back to the middle of the last century. And that's the problem. I think you're using, you know, it's almost like bloodletting.
Yeah.
Like, let's bring bloodletting back in, medicine. I mean, the bloodletting days are over. So anyway, that's a long-winded, but just so people know, I just don't poo-poo that stuff. I mean, I think it had a place in history, a great place, but I think we can figure out, just like, the first tape deck was huge. It kept getting smaller, fewer moving parts, down where now it's a little teeny thing and you can have 500,000 songs on it.
Yeah.
Everything gets smaller and simpler and more efficient. And I think that acting training can be the same way.
And if you're an actor, I certainly, when I started taking workshops when I moved to Toronto in the 90s, I studied with a guy named Alan Jordan who'd studied with Sanford Meisner, and there's plenty of people around who are teaching, who work with some of these people that are well known for all these various teaching techniques and the method and that sort of thing. And I learned a lot from some of those classes. I worked with great people. I had fun doing scene work with them. But one of the things I found after a while was, I'd be taking a class for a while, and I find that there was just so many tools that you were introduced to, and they felt like layers after a while. And sometimes if you took a class for a while, you just felt like they'd say, okay, you learn all this stuff and then throw it away and then be in the moment. And it was hard to do that sometimes. It felt like at one point I left a class and felt I just have to peel all these layers away. And so when I first started studying with you, I was like, okay, I get this. This is refreshing.
Well, I appreciate that. And here it is. This is what I tell actors all the time. If a human being wouldn't be thinking about it, don't think about it.
Mm-hmm.
Just don't think about it. You're wasting time. Who thinks about this stuff that actors are told to think about and then forget? That to me feels like you're punking someone.
Yeah.
Hey, David, think okay, no, don't think about that. Okay, go, action. I mean, it just feels like I've just punked you. So instead of telling people stuff that they need to forget, I think I'll just tell the people the stuff they need to remember, right? Because what happens if you don't remember to forget to remember to forget? You see what I mean? Then you're stuck and you're there with all that stuff in your head.
Yeah.
I'd rather, just like with people, just let's think about the stuff we think about. Let's not worry about the acting stuff.
Yeah.
And, the other argument I give people is I say, why do you do that stuff? They go, oh, it makes my work more effective. And I'll say, well, how does it make it more effective? They go, well, I'm more potent. I'm more interesting. I'm more this. I'm more that. It's just better, more. I go, okay. Well, then in real life, when it really counts, when you have to talk your, wife out of divorcing you or get a raise at your job, do you break it all down and do this whole acting thing, use all these fancy tools that make you so much better? No, you don't. In fact, if I brought it up, you'd tell me to get out of here because I'm not taking your life seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So if you wouldn't use these things in real life when it really counts, why do you use them when you act?
Yeah.
It never made sense to me. It's like, I don't want to think about garbage. I want people to be thinking about the stuff they're talking about as they would in life. How insincere would it be, David, if you came to, say, perhaps to console me about the loss of my father, and you're sitting there with me and talking, but what you're actually got going in your head is some little acting thing that's supposed to make you more interesting.
Yeah.
What kind of a human being would actually do? You'd have to be Satan. Or an actor, or a bad actor.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, if people go to your website, you've got a video right at the start that's got your mission statement or talks about sort of
That's
what
right.
your class is all about. And you do a great job of describing what your main goal is in your approach to your program. And you talk about, in those moments in our lives when the shit hits the fan and things are either falling apart or they're amazing or whatever it is, those big moments, we don't spend much time thinking about how we're going to, like you said, how, what are the words we're going to use? You're just in the moment, you're just there, and that's it. And that's what acting should be.
Well, the fact that actors sit around, I give them a hard time about it, jokingly, of course. I say, you just sit around trying to figure out how to say stuff. Aside from breathing, I think we communicate more than anything else, even more than sleep, because you'd have to say that, well, if you slept 8 hours, you'd have 16 that you could be communicating. From the moment we cry for our mommy's milk, we have already figured out how to negotiate getting fed. Mm-hmm. If I cry, I get the nipple. We immediately, and from that point on, we are learning how to work people, negotiate, communicate. It's the thing we do more than anything. And we have to do it at the drop of a hat, when the door opens up, when something suddenly happens. We are so proficient at that thing. The idea that a person sits around thinking about how they're going to say something to me, it seems insane. And of course, I ask actors, I say, do you practice how you're going to talk to the coffee barista when you get there? Do you, I'll have a latte. Let me see, I'll say, have a latte. No, it's too hot. Oh, I love it. I mean, who does this? But an actor will do it until they hear it, and then they'll go, that's how I'm going to say it.
Yeah.
What kind of a lunatic would do this? And so, of course, I give actors a hard time about it. I say, you can't practice like that. That's I'm going to know that you practiced it. I'll know. Would you do that in life? No, somebody might go, hey, David, have you been practicing this? I mean, you would never want to be caught.
Well, and not only that, though, too, and people who don't work in the business might think that when you work on a film that you show up and you get to rehearse with the actors and stuff. There used to be some directors that had time and money to do that kind of stuff, but it doesn't happen anymore. You're expected to show up on the day. You got to get your sleep. You got to show up. You got to, feed yourself. You got to know your lines. And then you walk into a situation where you're standing in front of another actor and you got to be in the moment. And then sometimes you've got to be, in the moment with a big star and you're nervous as all hell and you want to crap yourself and you got to keep your shit together. And that's how it works these days.
I'll give you an example. I did a Homeland. I was lucky enough to do one of those. Mm-hmm. And I was flown to Morocco. All big deal. I'm going to be playing an agent. It's going to be a Persian agent, which means I have to have an accent.
Yeah.
We get into town. And it was like, I think it was that day they just wanted to kind of do something. It was so quick, but I remember we drove to a location. And then the guy just took me over and said, hey, this is Claire Danes. We want to run that scene real quick to get an idea. And we stood under a fig tree.
Yeah.
And I basically just landed. Yeah. And now I'm running lines with my stupid little accent with the director, with a bunch of people standing around. It was so, talk about dry humping, man. It was just nothing. It was the worst. And I thought, this is what you got to get ready for. That's why I've never had my actors ever rehearse a scene outside of the class or run lines.
Yeah. Well, you talk about dry humping. There's no foreplay. It's just...
No, there's none. You got to just step up and play the tennis match. You just got to get ready to go. And so the whole idea that you would practice in a situation, which these classes do, where you get to go off and rehearse together. There are many reasons why that's wrong. But the main one is you're never going to do that in real life. Why would you practice that? I've had people that the only way they train, they come to me, they're so verklempt when they're having to say the lines for the first time. I think, boy, I get people ready for professional work. Mm-hmm. So better you just be able to come right out of the box and really throw down hard.
Yeah.
I need to get you ready to be able to do that, because not only will they tell you to come over here and here's whoever the star is, but there's on a set, if you're inside, not under a fig tree, there's maybe 100 people standing around figuring out what they're going to be moving where and how they're going to lay track down. And they're kind of paying attention, but they're also thinking lunch is coming up. Mm-hmm. And you got this weird thing where the director's kind of talking to the cinematographer over his shoulder quietly, but you can still feel his face turning away, whispering stuff. Yeah. So you don't have everyone's focus and you're just hoping you're not going to get fired. It's a weird moment. So yeah, I get people ready for actual combat.
Well, you ran a theater for a lot of years. That's rehearsal is a luxury you get when you're doing theater, but it just doesn't exist at all in film and television.
No, and the reason it does in theater, of course, is because you're supposed to start a show and 2 hours later, without stopping. You got to have everything done from beginning to end. If we're just going to do little snippets and we're filming and we can go and take it back, well, no, you don't have to have as much intense rehearsal. But you're putting on a show, and that thing has to start from the top and go to the end, and every little, cup needs to be where it's supposed to be, and everything's supposed to happen, and the lights. There's a lot to that. That's a different thing altogether. But that doesn't mean that we still can't get some good rehearsing in while the cameras are going, when they're starting to set things up, when we're doing our blocking. The good actor is using every time they go through it to try and just get better in the moment as to what they're doing, and rehearse and find some new stuff, some interesting stuff. And I've told actors that even through all the different setups, whether it be a 2-shot, a single, a master, a 3-shot, whatever, same scene over and over again, the good actor changes what they're doing. They're constantly just trying to find something fresh while they're working, because what we know is that a good editing room will take your best stuff, your greatest hits out of all that, and they will fit it together, and you'll have a much better performance than if you just stuck to one thing that you rehearsed and you did it exactly the same way every time. I know when I'm working with actors on a set, and then I realize by the second or third, oh, this is how they practiced it. It's never as fun as people who are constantly on their toes with you. That's where you get the real magic in film, I think.
Yeah, and with the editor too. I mean, if somebody goes in and they practice it that way and they think, oh, this is it, I've nailed the scene or whatever, they do it 4 times. It doesn't matter if they did it 4 times. It's just the same take.
That's
The
right.
editor only has one option.
That's
Right.
right.
It doesn't
That's
matter.
right.
Like, I mean, even if you do something, you just decide that you're going to do something that's way out of the box, and maybe you don't think it's right, but at least the editor has another option. You do it five
Always.
different ways. That's
I remember laying on the pavement for some show I did where I was the bad guy and I was dying. And I think they had me die 4 times it was a gunshot wound, I think.
yeah.
And each time I did it, I died differently there. The way I lost my breath, what my body did. And the director even came up to me and said, all right, Jeff, you gave me 4 good options. Why not? They're just going to use one of them. And they're only going to probably use a second of it at that. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like I said, man, it's sure beats working for a living.
I remember I remember a situation where I was playing a bounty hunter in some sci-fi movie, and I'm shooting down on right downtown in the financial district, and I'm a bounty hunter in this scene, and I get shot first, and then a few other people get shot, and then a bunch of other stuff happens. So it means that I go down on the ground and I have to lie there while they shoot all the other stuff around, while everybody else gets picked off. And as I go down on the ground, I'm lying with my face on the concrete. I realize, oh my God, I'm lying in somebody's piss from the night before. Like somebody came out of the club the night, and I got my nose in somebody's urine, and I got to lie here for the next hour while they shoot everything else around me.
Oh, that is just so bad.
The glamour.
Yeah. Well, okay. That's when it's not perfect. Wow.
But all right. So yeah, you've been teaching this non-method, or this, you've been teaching this straight ahead way of approaching acting now you've been doing it for a while. You've been
40 years.
Yeah. And people are gravitating to what you're doing. I Googled you today, and one of the things I didn't expect to find was just a whole bunch of posts on Reddit about people talking about what you're doing, whether or not, I've taken 4 classes and I'm not sure yet, or somebody else saying, I love it. There's all kinds of conversation when you're doing this kind of thing. You've done 140 plus podcasts now, and
I've done 140 podcasts. I didn't even realize. What are you talking about, Reddit? What are people saying?
Well, I saw you had posted something on there, or somebody, saying, hi, I'm Jeff, and I've got this class going and stuff on Reddit. And then people were just, people were commenting saying, oh, I've heard about Jeff and I bought his book and I'm halfway through the book.
Oh, that is so funny, because I think that would have to be from a few years ago. A few years ago, one of my students said, hey, I want to put you on Reddit. We'll have a question and answer or something. A few years ago, right?
Yeah.
And then,
I'm looking at responses here from 2 years ago.
Right.
Yeah. But it's interesting, right? People are doing their research and they're talking to each other.
Fabulous. Yeah. As a matter of fact, you know what? I just had somebody that's coming to see the Zoom class. And when I said, how did you find out? And it's usually always the podcast. They said, I read something on Reddit.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that's exactly what you're talking about right there.
Yeah. Well, people are, they're going to spend their money on classes and stuff. They're looking into it and they're talking to each other, and that's a cool
it's
thing
great.
too.
And luckily the podcast had gotten me an international audience, because of course they can access it anywhere. And if you Google or whatever people do when they go a podcast on acting, there's like none except mine apparently. So it always comes up, and then so consequently, my classes are, an international group, which I love all the different accents. I mean, this morning I had a woman in Berlin, and I had someone in Switzerland, and the UK, and then Toronto. So, you have these, you can ask them, first of all, what's the weather like? And I just feel like I'm, you're talking in real time to people on the other side of the world. It's glorious. And then you've got all their accents, it's just a joy. And being a teacher, to realize that the problems, the situations, the things as actors go through, it's the same all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same. It's amazing. It's just a different accent, but the same frustrations, the same preoccupations, the same shortcomings with their acting and everything. And
well, last time I took a workshop with you was, I've been out of the country for a little bit. It was probably about 3 years ago. I was taking a workshop with you, and then talking about, all right, well, I'm going to sign up for another month or whatever. And you're like, you know what? I'm off to Australia. And then you were doing stuff in Australia. I think you did some classes in the UK. Where have you been with your workshop?
Well, primarily, I didn't get to the one in the UK. I had to cancel that. But I've been to Australia 4 times.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, all across well, Canada, actually Calgary too, but Vancouver, of course, and Toronto. And then in the States, it's, New York and Florida and Chicago and Atlanta. And then some southern places like Mississippi, some crazy places where, people were interested in having me come down, and I did. I remember one in Mississippi. Can't remember the town, but I looked around. I swear, I was looking at this room full of people, and I thought, these people look like farmers. I mean, I had a hard time believing they were there for acting, and not to, judge a book by its cover, but they basically were. And I thought, man, everyone's interested in this stuff.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. They want to come out and find out about what this acting stuff is. So, you get this like really interesting small town with a bunch of people that are thinking, yeah, me too, man. And they just want to, so it was, in overalls. I mean, really looking like farmers, and yet they're getting up and doing scenes and shit.
Well, it's a big dream machine, right?
Oh, it is. I loved traveling and teaching. It's a real joy. I feel like, it's kind of paying for my vacation. Yeah. I get to meet all these interesting people. When I go to Australia, I usually stay for a month, because I go to 4 different cities once a week, one each week. And so it's like, come on, man, this is, again, I look around, I think I'm the luckiest guy in the world, man. It's crazy.
What you'd been in LA for a couple decades. You were set up there. You had your own theater. You were doing your thing. What brought you to Toronto in the first place? You get cast in something? You're chasing after a girl?
No, well, I'm always chasing after a girl. No, what happened was I started going up to Vancouver when I first started my seminars, my weekend seminars, and a wonderful lady up there named Gina Chiarelli, she was like the point person. She had me come up to do, because I was from LA, I did this 2-day thing. And it sold out. And then she said, hey, why don't we do another one? I said, yeah, I'd love to. She goes, how about in a few months? And I said, I was hoping she'd say like in a month. Next day, she said, I think we're going to do it in a month. Everybody has been talking. And then 2 days later, she said, we're sold out. And that started a thing where I was going up once a month on Alaska Airlines, which at the time, I think they just opened it. It was like $150 round trip from LA, 2.5 hours, nothing. And I would stay in a beautiful hotel, and I would teach these wonderful actors each weekend. And I did meet a woman, and she said to me, why don't you act anymore? I said, well, I'm basically teaching and directing. But then I thought, I'll tell her the truth. I said, I miss it so much. She said, well, you know what? If I called my agent, I bet she'd take you on a second. So I gave her $25, because that's how much the thing was. I said, go call your agent. And she did. And then the other students found out. Then I had a pick of agents, it seemed, because I was from LA and I was obnoxious. I don't know. And I started there. And then I did a play, Speed the Plow. Somebody saw that play and said, you know what, that should be in Toronto, and I'm going to make it happen. I said, well, you giddy up, you do that. Year and a half later, this woman called me, said, it's set up 500-seat theater at the Jane Mallet. You're going to be directing and starring in it again, and, da-da-da. And we're going to put you up in a hotel. Suddenly, I'm in Toronto. I did the play. An agent saw me, signed me. I had one audition. I got the part. It kept me there. And then I auditioned for a small part in that great new drama, The 11th Hour. And I said to my agent, I think it went well. And he called me back and said, yeah, they want you in for one of the leads. That never happened. So I went in, and it was like just within a few days, I was suddenly one of the cast members of this, the hottest new, beautifully written drama about journalism. And I was one of the journalists, Kamal Azizi. And that kept me there, and then after that first season, I won the Gemini, and it just, my life changed, and it was just crazy how that worked out. But that's how I got up there, and I just ended up living there because I did, a few shows in a row, and life was bountiful.
Yeah, well, you were booking all kinds of great roles there.
Yeah, well, I had that. Then my own show. I was on Being Eric. I went in for a guest star at the end of the first season, and then they kept me in all 4 seasons, being yet another obnoxious man. I wonder where this comes from. And I was also in Show Me Yours for 2 seasons. Yeah. I was one of the leads. And at one point, I was doing 2 shows at once, and they would take me from one set, talk about double dipping, to the other set, and it's so funny how quickly you get used to it. You think, well, this is my life.
Yeah.
This is what I do. I mean, that's what I wished for, and here we are. And then it goes away, and you look back and you think, my God, how did that happen? And it's not that I ever thought I was always knew I was fortunate. But it's amazing how quickly you just accept it. You think, yes, well, this is what I'm working for. Shall I act surprised?
I was going to ask you, you can see things are changing, and one conversation that comes up a lot, especially around Academy Award time, is diversity in casting. And I remember you telling me many years ago how you had seen a shift in California, that you were, there was that sort of golden age of cinema, and there were a lot of actors of all kinds of different ethnicities that were doing really well. And then all of a sudden in the 80s, there was a big shift where they just started casting like just blonde white dudes.
Man, I got to tell you, it's so funny you remember that, because that is an ancient story. But I'll tell you, it was because when I started out, the people were Pacino and De Niro and all the dark guys that I fell right into. So I was hot as a biscuit. And then two people came on to the scene. It was, he's got Blue Bloods now.
Tom Selleck.
Yes. And then it suddenly was Tom Selleck and Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
And like Richard Chamberlain. And I remember there's a show called Rich Man, Poor Man. Mm-hmm. And that's where Nick Nolte came out. Suddenly there were these white people. Mm-hmm. And when white people become huge stars in the motion pictures, it set the tone. And all of a sudden, where there were plentiful roles for Jeff to have a chance, I was suddenly going to auditions with so much fewer roles. I would look around the room and there'd be like bona fide TV stars in the room with. And I'd think, okay, there's no way I'm going to get this part. That's that guy, And I remember that. And so from then, it's basically been the same thing. The fact is that we tend to represent in television whatever's hot. Whatever's hot is usually who the stars are and what they look like that are making the most money.
Yeah.
And they tend to then reflect those in television. Well, things have gotten so diversified now. I don't see those, huge shifts anymore, because there are people of all sorts of colors, whether they're directing or acting. So things are different. And diversification is big, as it should be, and it should get bigger and bigger. So, there's hope for all the rest of the people that aren't necessarily white.
Well, even if you look on Facebook and stuff, the different casting agencies and different groups that are involved in casting or, sharing casting notices, there's always a big, what looks like legal, saying, this role is open to all kinds of ethnicities and this sort of, and I wonder, at first you'd kind of think, oh, well, is that just lip service? Is it happening? But you can see it. I remember I used to do some commercial work, haven't done it in a while, but, got to a point where I'd show up at an audition and all of a sudden my wife was a black woman or my wife was an Asian woman for the commercial and my kids were, mixed race kids or whatever. And you could see the shift, and you can see it on American TV. I see it probably a little bit more on Canadian TV when I watch some of the commercials back home, that you see a lot more diversity there. And obviously you're starting to see it film a lot more. What do you think of the idea, though, that you have to be, and I don't even know how I feel about it, but if you were going to play somebody who had, the person has a speech impediment or whatever, like sort of that was the Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man. Now people kind of say, well,
certainly you could say that certainly with regard to if a person is supposed to be a certain sexual identify, if a person is supposed to be, Hispanic, he must have Hispanic blood. If a person is he must have that, that I have a problem with. I have a problem with mainly because, I get it. And I think people that are of that should have the opportunity. But at the end of the day, I think within reason, I really want the best actors cast in those parts. And so, for instance, if I did see a lot of people that were actually Hispanic, and then there was a fellow who was actually from another thing, but he looked like he was Hispanic and he killed it, I'd rather have that guy play the part or that gal, you give everyone a chance, and then I think that whoever looks best should have the opportunity to get it. I think that's gotten a little crazy. I think that certain groups should have more opportunity, and I think all groups that are of the thing that is the part is should have the opportunity to actually audition for it. And if they are great, then they should get the part. But I can't give somebody the part just because you are absolutely 100% this character that we wrote. And even though this other guy looks like, in fact, he is also, but he's not like you are that authentic, I can't use him now. That to me is weird. That feels like if this were some sort of government job, some sort of stipulation in order to get funding, I get it. But to make movies and do art, I think we just got to just relax a little bit, The days of having Peter Sellers play East Indian man in The Party, gone. We can't do that.
Yeah.
But we just go find an incredibly funny East Indian guy. Of course we do.
Mm-hmm.
But then that does preclude certain people who are great at doing impersonations or things. I mean, one was giving Robert Downey Jr. that problem about Tropical Thunder, about him playing that, and at a point where do we can't laugh anymore? We can't have fun. Is it degrading what he's doing, or is it just entertainment and funny? I don't want things to get out of hand, but I think we should always be able to discuss these things as adults and try and make the best choice.
Yeah.
But if a person doesn't have any legs, do we go and we can only hire a double amputee? What do we do about these things? Do we give a double amputee a chance to act in the part and see how they do? Yes, absolutely, of course. And if they're great, they should have the part.
Yeah, it's I guess the one thing is it's difficult as being a revisionist now, looking back. There's no way Gary Sinise should have gotten the Captain Dan part in Forrest Gump, because that should have been offered to another actor or whatever. It's easy to kind of poo-poo choices that were made back in the day. But anyways, like we said, things have definitely changed, and you're seeing more diversity in casting these days. It is refreshing because, like you said, in the 80s, it seemed like especially there were so many roles that were played by, for lack of a better way of putting it, the white high school quarterback kind of guy was the hero in all the 80s comedies, teen comedies.
That's pretty much the case. Yeah, that's how it is. It's a fad. It's a style. It's whatever. I mean, the world has changed, and I think in that regard for the better. But it was what it was. Nobody seemed to notice that much. I mean, I'm sure people of color did, but they should have. But I remember that it was just a different time. Everything seemed so squeaky different. I think reality is setting in, and I think that is being reflected in the movies, and it's great.
Yeah. Was it at that period back in the day that you saw that shift, that you kind of stepped away with it and doubled down on the teaching, or you were still out there auditioning for a lot of stuff? Or
I was always auditioning for stuff. There was a period that I didn't right before I came up to Canada, because nobody would see me. I was working in my own theater, but I made a film, but no, the teaching always, I knew I'd be a teacher my whole life. It was nothing I ever did because I, thought, well, this will be a good way to augment my income. No, I've always wanted to, it's been my goal to change the way acting is taught in the world. Mm-hmm. And I know that sounds huge, but a person's got to have a goal, but I think it needs to change. I know that from having done this for 40 years, I see what it does to actors and how much more efficient they become. Yeah. So, if I could continue this movement and get things to shift to where actors are having a lot more fun and they're being a lot more effective and enjoying their work. I mean, I hear this all the time. Wow, now acting's fun again. Now I feel much more confident. I was sick and tired. I mean, I hear the same thing, no matter what the language is, coming from what part of the world. But it's like, they'll hear the podcasts or read my book, and then I'll hear them say, I always felt that it should be easier. I never liked those classes. I mean, it's like all these people are right beneath the surface, really hating sitting in these classes where they just feel silly and having to do dumb exercises, and they don't want to do it. They feel humiliated, and everybody's quiet because they think, well, that's what you're supposed to do, until someone says not necessarily. And then they all stand up and go, good. I never liked this stuff. I mean, I got to tell you, I get at least an email a week from someone in the world telling me that.
Yeah. And what do you think makes a good teacher? What's one or two top characteristics that make somebody a good teacher, somebody who connects well?
I get it. Sure. I'll tell you. I think there are two types of teachers. Let's say that both of them are offering good information. It's good, solid information. Okay, so now we're talking about the teaching aspect. I think most teachers, as we call them, with good information, are basically lecturers. Mm-hmm. They're imparting knowledge. They're telling you what it is. And if you listen to them, the stuff that this particular teacher is saying is credible. It's good intel. Mm-hmm. That person to me is a lecturer. Yep. A teacher is someone that not only does what the lecturer does, but also is able to impact change in the actor, the student they're working with. Like right now, like I'm not only going to give you information, but I'm going to give it to you in a specific way that's going to get you to change right now. Mm-hmm. That to me is a true teacher. Otherwise, you're imparting knowledge. And if it's useful, good knowledge, solid intel, that's fabulous. We need a world of those.
Mhm.
But a real teacher to me is someone who can impact change immediately. So in my classes, one of the things I say is that, look, you're going to get better now. Your work, you're going to feel better now. I feel like what happens in a lot of classes is the actor doesn't improve necessarily, and the teacher will just criticize them, and they'll sit down, and it's the actor's fault. They're inept. They're not good enough. They didn't hear it. They didn't get it. I don't think that should be. I think that if you come to me, I should be able to get you to change immediately and for the better, and for you to notice it and feel better. And everyone watching, it's on me. It's not on anyone else. It's easy to blame a student. If you went to get golf lessons, you keep slicing it. He said, what can I tell you? I'm telling you how to swing the club. You can't swing, buddy. I'm sorry. Just keep paying me. I mean, it would never fly.
Yeah. Well, and I think that the thing too about specifically when you're teaching actors is that, teaching somebody in a way where they can take that information and you can apply it really quickly, like you said, and sort of pivot is so important, because that's what you need to do on a set, right? Because a director will give you a little bit of a nugget and say, here's a little bit of advice. You have to be able to pivot quickly, do it differently, so that, like we said earlier, the editor and everybody has more options to work with.
Yes, it is knowing what you can't. I don't talk to all the people I work with the same way. Certain people need certain information a certain way. You have to be able to look at someone, and I'm always thinking, what are the fewest moves I can make to get David where I want him to be? In other words, what's the least amount of information I can give him? Because the least amount to me, it's not just more elegant. It gives you less to think about. I'm looking for 1, 2, 3 words. I'm looking for something I can tell you and you go, oh, okay, I got it. And then that'll generally carry us all the way through. To me, the novice teacher talks too much when they're giving information. Then all that does is you just fill in the person's head with a bunch of stuff. It's no good. So this idea of being able to get an actor, you got to be able to talk to everyone a little differently. Different people have different idiosyncrasies, different lack of confidence, whatever it is. You have to be able to kind of read an actor and then think, what's the best way?
Yeah. I think I've even seen it, in some of your classes before. There's those moments where sometimes it's just saying to an actor, look, in this, at this point, your wife is having sex with your best friend. You probably should be more upset about that.
Yeah. And
this might hit you harder.
It really is. It is like, I kind of said, it's like you give them the scent, like they're bloodhounds. You got to get the right scent. You give it to them and then they can and take off. They go. But you got to let them know what's going on. And so it's trying to be able to figure out what somebody needs to hear. Sometimes somebody you just need to say, man, that was great. Do it again. Other people, they need a trigger. You got to tell them something. But I enjoy it, man. I love trying to unlock that and get, people like I look at them like they're athletes, just trying to get people to be able to perform better. To me is a real joy. And it's so obvious when it works, that's the thing.
Yeah.
Everyone in the room knows it. Everyone on Zoom can see the difference,
Yeah.
It's the best lesson in the world.
So talking about pivoting, one of the things you did, we were chatting the other day about your Zoom classes. This is something that you got into before the pandemic hit. So you were kind of ready for what the industry ended up jumping to, and that was working with Zoom, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had been doing it in as much as I was always doing privates and audition coaching on the computer. And then because I had this international audience from all my podcasts, and then we couldn't get together anymore, it was a couple of my friends that said, man, you should try the Zoom thing. And I thought, well, how does that even work, So somebody quickly gave me a lesson. I tried it. And I was shocked at how effective it's been. I love it as a tool. I mean, I know there are actors that say, well, I don't know, I'm telling you, man, if you can hear this, come try one, because it really works well.
Yep.
I feel it's more efficient. I feel it's almost like I've been given a scalpel of some kind. It's like I'm right looking at the actor's face. I have the two of them. And there's just such a focus. There's no distraction of being in a class. They're right on camera, and most actors are having to audition through Zoom now and do all sorts of similar computer-like auditioning and acting. So I know it's making my actors a lot sharper in that sense. And so because of the international thing with all the podcasts, once I started doing the Zoom, Then I just tried to figure out what would be the best model. And for me, it's an hour and a half tops, and with about 8 to 10 actors, so 4 to 5 scenes. But sometimes there's, the 3 scenes if some people aren't showing up. So it's a short class, and no one loses energy. I mean, I hear about these people saying, "Oh, it's a 4-hour class." I'm saying, "Oh my God!" And you're just sitting in your house. I can't imagine such torture.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I do 8 of those a week, and it's a joy. It never feels like work to me. It's a joy.
And it's not terribly out of place, because before the pandemic hit anyways, the industry had well gotten used to the fact that, actors were doing self-tapes from home. Now there are, it used to be that, you'd go in and do the same thing every time you audition. You'd go sit out in the lobby with 15 other actors, and you'd sign in, and then you'd nervously, go over your lines, and then step in, do introduce yourself, do your thing, and then leave. But now, every actor's got a blue cloth that they hang over their patio door, and their own camera, and their lighting, their ring light, and they set up and they do their audition and send it in. That's just kind of, the way it goes in a lot of cases, because it's economical.
It is, and it is a lot easier, certainly for the people auditioning, I mean, in my career, I've seen over 10,000 auditions, and immediately. So if you're calling people into a room and you just see them in real life, you might go immediately, no way, can't use that. Nope, it's too different. And so you sit for 5 minutes and have small talk, and, man, you're always behind the 8 ball in production. So to be able to just put a tape on, start to watch, do I like this person, quality of the voice, the way they look, will they look at my cast? I can watch, or I can just hit stop. That's it. I'm not interested. That's how it is,
Yeah.
So because a lot of it is look and sound and how you're going to fit in a cast. I can't tell you the times we've had great people coming, great people. But we've already cast someone that has red hair. And we think, well, they're going to be together. We have 2 redheads. I mean, it's so stupid, the reason you do it. We've already got too many blondes. He's too tall. He's too short. There's just dumb. They look like they could be brother and sister, supposed to be married. I can't hire her. Look, they look like they're actually related. I mean, you just come up with these reasons that actors don't even know. And if you knew, you'd realize how much out of your hands it is.
Yeah.
I tell actors, look, you take your audition, you stuff it down in the bottle, then you put the cork in real tight, and you throw it into the ocean. And if you get really lucky, phone will ring. I mean, that's all you can do, because it is such a, who knows why they're picking people sometimes. Yeah. And believe me, it's never, we're going to get the most, the best. I've had to turn the best person away for the dumbest reason, but it was very practical.
Yeah. I've gone to those Q&As in the past at like the actor conferences, and where they've had casting people come in, and that's some of the best advice you could get from casting people when they talk about, look, it's not you. Oftentimes it's, because it can be the weirdest things in the world. Maybe there's an executive or somebody who's, especially for commercial stuff or whatever, just doesn't like you because you look like their brother-in-law, or they just had a horrible lunch and everybody's in a bad mood, and they're not going to like anybody they see in the next hour or whatever. There's just so many factors.
It's crazy.
Best thing that ever happened to me was at one point when I just decided years ago that I go into an audition and I do it and I walk out and I forget like I never did it. And if it comes back to you, like you said, then it's fantastic or whatever, but you just can't go home and stew about this stuff.
You can't. I always like the actors. I'd say, look, you walk into the room, you take the bat, you hit the ball as hard as you can up into the stands, you hand the bat back and you say, thanks, folks, and you walk out. There's nothing sexier than a person who just walks in, no muss, no fuss. You ready to go? Absolutely. They crush it and then just say, thank you, folks, and they walk away. You think they're a rock star.
Yeah.
And then you have these people that were told, no, you got to make them remember you. And, you got to talk and tell a little funny anecdote. No, you don't. No, you don't.
Yeah. Yeah.
You got to come in and crush whatever it is, say, thank you so much, and go like you've got somewhere else to go. And I've sat in the room and thought, who was that? I mean, you can't believe it. They did this incredible job like it was nothing. And then they're so kind. They just say, thanks, everyone. And they just walk out of the room.
Yeah.
You just want to go chase them down,
Yeah.
So to me, that's the cool way to do it.
Yeah, for sure. So you really love the whole Zoom thing. What do you miss about being in a class, press in the flesh and being face to face?
Well, listen, I will to travel.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll teach one class. I think I'll start teaching this summer here in LA, but they'll come to me. Otherwise, no, I'm never going to stop Zoom. It gives me this international audience that is it's such a joy, and it's a great price point. I make it incredibly affordable for people. It's obviously more expensive to study with me in real life, but because of Zoom, nobody has to get dressed and get in a car and drive across town, and everyone's improving. I mean, I had 8 students in a class the other morning, and only 4 were there because 4 of them were actually working. And I thought, man, I gotta dial back the teaching because I'm just gonna run myself out of work, man. Everybody's just gonna go off, and I'll be sitting here alone. I mean, damn.
So the cool thing that you've been doing too is, people should look you up, reallifeactor.com. You've got your podcasts that are available at, everywhere where fine podcasts are streamed, and people can find the links right on your website. You've managed to give away a lot of great information to actors through your podcast, still doing your Zoom classes and stuff. But I'm assuming that those podcasts have been a great calling card for attracting students to the Zoom.
Everyone I get, aside from the guy from Reddit that we mentioned earlier, everyone is the podcaster. I mean, I get some referrals, but mostly it's the podcast. Mm-hmm. So I kind of figured that, look, first of all, I want the information to be out there. I mean, people ask me, why aren't you monetizing it? And, maybe I will someday, but I like putting the information out there. But the deal is this: if people like the information and they like what I say, it seems to me they'll look me up and they'll want me to train them.
Yeah.
I don't know why they wouldn't. And if the podcast is enough, well, there you go. Help yourself.
Well, you tune in and you like that information that's been provided generically for all kinds of people, but then you get to do the Zoom class and come in and get dialed in on and have it very specifically geared towards you and who you are and what you need as an actor to be able to get your job done.
I have gotten some of the most, I actually keep a file of them, some of the most beautiful letters from people who tell me they came across the podcast and it effectively changed their lives. I think it was because they were in such a crazy insanity situation of where they were training or working with people, acting had become dreary, and they come on to my, kind of wise guy podcasts, the way I talk about acting, and it seemed to just kind of unshackle them. And then they tell me some story about how they got a gig. And I mean, some of these things have almost brought me to tears. And when I read these lovely notes from people, I am completely okay with giving away those podcasts for free. Absolutely. I mean, it's hard to believe some of the stuff people say, but sometimes people just need someone to say, hey, you know what you think is okay? You need to just enjoy yourself, forget about all that nonsense. And they hear that and it changes their life. And, that's fantastic because a lot of people don't talk that way, of course.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And there are a lot of people out there that want to be told that it's okay that you don't like all that old stuff. It's okay that you want to keep it simple. It's okay that you don't do a 10-page backstory. Mm-hmm. Here's what you need to do. And it gives them some freedom. So, I'm lucky enough to get notes from these people as well. But hey, look, I want world domination. And, I'd like to be the king of the world. So, but for right now, I'm okay. This is all okay. Yeah.
Well, before we sign off, I was going to mention one of the notes I saw on Reddit, which I thought was pretty cool and applies for people who, I think sometimes joining an acting class especially when you're new and you're starting out, is kind of like going to the gym the first time. You go in, you think, I'm going to go in and I'm going to look like an idiot. I'm not going to know how to use the equipment. Everybody's going to look at me. They can tell I haven't been exercising. I'm scrawny, that kind of thing. And there's the same sort of feeling when you first step into an acting class. And one of the people who had written up on, they'd taken a couple of your classes, said, the first day I showed up there, he goes, I'm a beginner actor. I'm totally new to this. He said, but I stepped into the room and I quickly realized that there was a handful of us that were brand new actors and we're green. And there were a bunch of people who were in the class that were veteran or experienced actors or were doing stuff. And he goes, the first day there, I watched Jeff work through a scene for an audition for a network show with a guy. And he said the guy did the scene that he was going to be in, and Jeff had notes, and then we talked about it, and then all these, green actors got to watch how this was happening. And by the end, the scene that we saw was completely different, and the guy went in and booked the thing the next day. That was a great write-up on what happens in a class like yours.
Wow.
That that's the cool thing about this is that you get to go in and there's the newbies, the green guys.
I love mixing the people together. And I got to tell you, I am so blessed. My actors are the loveliest people in the world, man. Well, I don't let people have airs. I don't believe in any of that stuff. I think it's wrong. And so I don't like the guru concept. I don't like pretending like that. So I like to keep things respectful and easy. But when somebody new comes in, I just find the other actors are always so quick to just, bring them in and work with them. This elitist thing, that's why I've always made fun of the master class, I don't believe in elitism. And I think master, really? I've been doing this 40 years. I wouldn't feel comfortable in a master class. I don't like the name.
Yeah.
I just want to be in a class.
Well, you also
I'm happy to work with anyone. When you go onto a set, not everyone's a master, man. Some people aren't as good as other people. So what's what is this business? Well, I want to play with a tennis partner as good as me. I get that. And in any class, there are definitely some good people that gravitate towards each other. But I love the humility of everyone supporting each other. There is something about that. It's not just that it makes the world a better place, but it really makes a better actor, you see, because it keeps them from having airs and getting caught up in their own thing. I think the sweetest actors in the world are the people who don't even know they're an actor.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just sitting there reading a book, and then they get up and they crush a scene, on set. You didn't even realize they were in the cast, and they go over and they sit back down, and they're so nice. I think, oh my God. This to me, is the type of person I love. And when somebody brings airs into my class or acts like they're better than someone else, or is negative in some way, even in a personal note to me about someone else, I get rid of those people. I just say, you're done. I don't want to train you. I don't want you around my dojo. I don't like it.
Yeah.
I imagine someone like Anthony Hopkins, who's one of my heroes. He spoke at my graduation, and he's in my book. I put him in my book. He is such a humble, lovely guy. I think, if you're going to aspire to something, aspire to that.
Yeah. Just going full circle back to what we were talking about earlier on in the start of your career, you talked about working on Bosom Buddies with Tom Hanks. And there's a guy, no matter how many actors you talk to or how many crew people, I've never heard a story about he was a jerk, he was this, he was bitching about that. You just never hear bad things about guys like that.
I'll tell you, I'll leave you with the anecdote, So I was doing Hill Street Blues. And then right as that was still not on the air yet. In fact, that was such a big deal that when we were shooting scenes on the soundstage at MTM Studios, Charlie Moore Studios, one time I looked up and there was like 200 people watching. They had floated over from the other on break or whatever. We had an audience of people watching because so much had been made of the way that the set looked, so real, the way they were filming. I finished the scene one day with Joe Spano, and it was a long scene with many different spots we had to hit. And I remember when we finished, there was applause. And I thought, this is insane. I looked up, it was like I was in a theater. So then I did Bosom Buddies, and I was driving Tom home every night to Sherman Oaks, and he'd sit down in my seat and put his feet up on the dash, like just some kid. We were talking. And he asked me what I'd been doing, I think on the second night. I said, well, I just finished this show called the Hill Street Blues. And he said, yeah, what does your character do? And I told him about that character arc, how the guy died in my arms. This is a true story.
Yeah.
And he looked a little wistful. And I said, what? He said, oh, man, I'd love to do work like that. I said, well, Tom, I mean, come on, man, you got your own TV show. What are you talking about? Mm-hmm. He said, yeah, but I dress up like a girl. It's all silly, man. I want to do serious work. Mm-hmm. I swear to God. I remember the moment so clearly. I tapped his shoulder sitting on my passenger seat. I said, Tom, it'll happen, buddy. Mm-hmm. And then what happened to Tom? I mean, I just remember, and I actually had to go because I thought my career was on a similar path like Tom's because shit was happening for me. And I remember thinking, okay, buddy, but you got to go now because I got stuff I got to go do. But I remember patting his shoulder, and I knew it would happen to him. Because he was an extraordinary human being and a sweet, sweet man. And since we started, I actually auditioned for the same role he did on Bosom Buddies.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, I didn't get it. He got it. So we started at the same moment. And then I saw his career do what it did. But I got to tell you, I never had a speck of jealousy. Mm-hmm. Because I had met that man and I thought, if anyone deserves what's happening, it's Tom Hanks. And it just let it go. For the most part, I'm still a little bitter, perhaps.
Well, but you were on Hill Street Blues. He never was. So
I'll remind him of that if I ever see him.
He's never done a Stephen Bochco show. He doesn't have that in him.
Yeah, thank you. I feel better now. That's great.
All right. Well, man, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me, Jeff. It was great to see you. I look forward to, if you are back in Toronto and doing a class, to actually being in the room with you. If not, I should check out your Zoom classes and tell people that they should check out reallifeactor.com. Check out your podcast. If they like what they see there, they should get your book because it's a great book. And then they should check into your Zoom classes because it sounds like you're making that work.
Thanks, friend. Appreciate it. It's been a real pleasure, David.
Yeah, thank you.
So much.
Much
All
appreciated.
right,
Take care of yourself.
Okay, man.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
bye. There you have it, my conversation with Jeff Seymour. Thanks to Jeff for sharing his cool story. If you're enjoying Cool Story and you would like to support the podcast, you can do so by making a small monthly pledge by visiting patreon.com/coolstory with David J. McNeil. Also, thanks again to Mr. Jerry Stamp, who wrote and performed the Cool Story theme song and all other jingles and stings that appear on the show. Do yourselves a favor and look for Jerry's music wherever you stream. And if you like what you hear, visit iTunes and support Jerry by buying an album or two. And finally, thank you for listening. Until next time, pura vida.
Everybody's had some adventures. Everybody's had a few close calls. Everybody's got a story. What's yours?